Before we start tomorrow's class, I want to go over something what I call is the second of the golden rules. As you know, the first golden rule in our class is when solving equations, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. That's the first golden rule. Second golden rule is basically the idea that an equation of a line is a relationship between the x and the y. And the golden rule is if you know a value for the x, you can always find the y because this is a formula for y. But alternatively, if you know the y value, then you can find the value of x. And remember that x and y, when we plot x and y, they are ordered pairs and they form a graph. So the golden rule basically says if you know an x, you can find a y, or if you know the y, you can find the x using the equation. Okay, so I'm just going to go over some golden rule kind of questions that relate that idea together, which will lead into tomorrow's lesson. So let's start first. So if I have an equation of a line like this, and I want points, then I can use the equation and the idea of the golden rule to kind of come up with points. It says find a point on this line. That's it. So if I just have to write a point that's on the line, so clearly this is like if I draw a little grid here, this is y equals mx plus b. I could find some points on the line, and we know, say, one of the points right off the bat. Like I could clearly say, look, the y-intercept is 5. That means the point 0, 5 is on this graph. And how this follows the golden rule is the y-intercept has an x value of 0. So if I could find the y, if I didn't know it was 5, I could plug in 0 for x into the equation, and I solve for y. Y must equal negative 2 times 0, which is 0, and I get 5. So that would mean that when x is 0, y is 5, and that's a point on there. So that's 1 point on the graph. I could use the slope to get more points, but I could use this idea, this golden rule, to find more points. So say I said I wanted to know what, if the x value was 1, what is the y value? So I'm looking for 1 comma something, like y. Like I don't know the y yet, but I could use the equation to find it, and that's the golden rule. Y would equal 2 times whatever the x value is, in this case 1, and then I could add 5. Using BEDMAS, I would get negative 2 plus 5, which would be 3. So that means the golden rule here is saying that when x is 1, y is 3. And that's a point on this line too. When x is 1, y is 3, which might be about there. If I want another point on this line, I could put in any value I want. I could put in, let's say if I put in 2. So I'm looking for the point when x is 2, what's the y? I'm not sure. Use the equation. Negative 2 times 2 plus 5, that's negative 2 times 2 is negative 4 plus 5, that's 1. So this is saying when x is 2, the y is 1, and that's a point. 2, 1, right there. And notice they're forming that line. I could get any point on that line in that fashion. That's the golden rule. If I want when x is 100, I put in 100. 100 comma something, y would equal negative 2 times 100 plus 5. So that'd be negative 200 plus 5, which would be negative 195. And notice when x is 100, way down there, the y would be way down here, which makes sense if it's following that pattern. That's the golden rule. You can find any point on the line in that fashion. Okay, so alternatively, say I wanted to know, say I had the reverse. So say I said, well, the y value is, let's say the y value I knew, but I didn't know the x value. Let's say the y value was, let's say like 18, and I didn't know what the x value that would go with that is. So I'm looking for this setup. So what I would do is plug in 18 for the y, and then I could solve for the x. So I subtract 5 on both sides to do that. This is where our equation solving comes in nicely. I get 13 over here and negative 2x. I can divide both sides by negative 2, and that means I get 13 over negative 2. I could reduce that. That's x is going to be, I could bring the negative up, right? The negative's on the bottom, bring it to the top or in front, and then that's 13 over 2. And if you crunch that out, that's going to be negative 6.5. So that means there's a point out there, negative 6.5, or negative 13 over 2, comma 18. That's the golden rule. I can find any point on that line I want if I know one of the values. Okay, so say in this case, if I find a point on the line, if the y-coordinate was 5. If I know the y-coordinate is 5, then it's 5 comma something. Plug it in, find the y-coordinate. Negative 2 times 5 plus 5. That's negative 10 plus 5. That's negative 5. So this tells me that the point 5, negative 5, is on that line. And the y-coordinate, when x is 5, is negative 5. So say I have this line, y equals x minus 8, and I have to find a point on the line where the x-coordinate is 0. So I want to know what the point is. The coordinates would be, the x-coordinate is 0, so I want to know what the y-coordinate is. So plug in 0 for x. 0 minus 8. That's just negative 8. So that means that this tells me that the point, when x is 0, y is negative 8. Say I had to find a point on this line with a y-coordinate of negative 3. So I don't know what the both coordinates are, but I know the y-coordinate is negative 3. I want to know the x-coordinate. The y is negative 3. Plug in negative 3 for y. Now solve for x. What would you do to solve for x? Did you say add 8? You're right. Yeah, add 8. Add 8 there. 0, add 8 there. You're looking at 5. You still got 2x. Divide both sides by 2. You got 5 over 2 for x. So that means when y is negative 3, the x is 5 over 2. That's the ordered pair. Okay, let's have a look at this. If the point 2, 1 is on the line, so this point is on the line, and this is my partial equation of the line. It says what is the y-intercept, which means what is the b. So I've got this set up. I know this is on the line. So if that point is on the line, that when I plug in 2 for x, this calculation has to come out to be the y. That's what the golden rule says. So if I plug these in, this is the y value, this is the x value, then when I plug in 2 for x, this calculation has to come out to be 1 if that point is on the line. That's what the golden rule says. So if that's true, then I can calculate b, which is the y-intercept. I can calculate for that. So notice here I got 1, this is 4 plus b, and then 4 plus something is 1. If I solve this, I'll subtract 4 on both sides, and that leaves me on the right side with b and negative 3 on the left. And that makes sense. 4, if I add negative 3 to 4, I get 1. Which means that that b in the equation, if 2 comma 1 is on the line, that b has to be negative 3. Which means this equation is really 2x minus 3. And that means the y-intercept is negative 3. That's what the golden rule says. Let's do another one. Let's say 4, 7 is on the line. So the golden rule must hold. When I plug in 4 for x, that calculation has to come out to be 7. So I don't know what this b is. It's kind of missing. That's the y-intercept. So if I had to find the y-intercept, I could plug in that point. So using the golden rule, 3/4 times the x, which is 4, plus this unknown number b, this all has to equal 7 by the golden rule because that's the y value. Alright, so let's find this b, this y-intercept. So if I multiply this out, notice this is over 1. This 4 can divide with this 4, and then this is 3 divided by 1, which is just 3. So if I subtract 3 on both sides, I get 4. So the y-intercept of this line had to be 4 if it's going to pass through 4, 7. By the golden rule is telling us that. Let's do one more here. If the x-intercept is negative 9, what is the y-intercept? And this is the line. And notice, again, this b is unknown, which is the value of the y-intercept. So the x-intercept is negative 9. So in this case, the x-intercept is negative 9. that would be, here's a grid, the x-axis is -9 way down here. There's the x. What is the coordinates of that point? -9 is the x. Do you know the y-coordinate of the x-intercept? You're right, it's 0. So that's the point. That point is on my line. By the golden rule, when I plug in -9 for x, that whole calculation has to come out to be 0. So 0 must equal -3 times -9 plus this unknown number b, and that means that's positive 27. So subtracting both sides on 27, you get -27 for the b. So the y-intercept must be -27.